Mini episode 250 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.info.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this very special joint webisode of the FDH Lounge and Sportsology here. This is a landmark occasion, the 250th mini episode of the FDH Lounge, and doing it in conjunction with our good friends at Sportsology. And ultimately, what could be more fitting than that? Because after we moved on from doing our 152 full-length episodes now to our present format of single mini episodes, nobody has been more instrumental in helping us, and really nobody has been a better friend and content partner that we've ever had, and that covers a lot of ground, than Sportsology. And it's primarily due to our good friend at Sportsology, Russ Cohen, author of the Winter Classic, the NHL'S SAVIOR, and we're going to be talking about that today and breaking it down. So let's get him in here right now. My good friend, fellow FDH Lounge Dignitary, and author, Russ Cohen. Russ, how you doing, buddy?
Good, Rick. How are you?
Oh, fine, thanks. Very geeked to get to talk about this book. We've been talking about setting this up for a while now. What a great occasion to do it. I'm curious as far as it goes, and I've tried to keep myself ignorant on some of these points here so that I can kind of react to them spontaneously as we're going along. That's what I like to do. What is your personal background with outdoor hockey? Did you get to play it a lot growing up?
No, I didn't get to play it a lot. We did have a neighbor that had a little outdoor rink down the block, and he probably got that when I was about, I want to say 14, 15. So, but we only could play like half ice. It wasn't like a regular rink. It wasn't like any of these great Canadian tricked out full rinks. Nothing like that. But we had fun with that, and we would go ice skating and but that's it. I mean, so we did play some, but not like formally, and not even shinny. It was like it was like less than shinny.
Okay, well, a little bit at least, yeah. And that's more than a lot of us have ever gotten to do. So that sounds pretty cool, actually. It was what you were able to do. I know that even predating the Winter Classic, you had gone to, what was it called, the Heritage Classic, I believe, right, back in 2003 in Edmonton. And talk about what went into that at the time. It was such a novelty. And again, not that the Winter Classic hasn't been when it's been introduced to the United States, but the first time that it was ever done, it was a real experimental feel to it. Talk about what it was like to be there and what your sense was of if it would ever happen again.
Yeah, it was crazy because I remember that there was this talk of it years before. It was about the third year that I was actually covering hockey, and then all of a sudden they announced, hey, there's going to be this game. And I'm thinking, all right, I got to go, because this is something where I would cover most NHL events anyhow, but this is in Edmonton. But it just seemed like it was going to be so different that I should do it. So we went and did it, and a buddy of mine, Shane Malloy, who I do my XM show with, went. He was, he had been to Edmonton plenty of times, so it was good to have sort of a guide, and it was a Commonwealth Stadium where they still play CFL games. It's not a, hockey arena, not even a big-time football stadium. It's like a small, older football stadium. So we went. It was unusual. We didn't have any seating outside, and the down below press area was just all underneath, no view of the game. So we literally, I was in snow pants. I didn't know what to expect for that one. So we were outside for the entire Megastars game, which, now they just call it an alumni game. But back then they had Gretzky and Messier and all the great Edmonton players on one side and all the great Montreal players on the other side with Guy Lafleur and company. So we went and stayed out for the entire game for that. And then I watched about a period outdoor of the NHL game, and then I stayed inside because it was just too cold.
I was going to say, there were some real pronounced fears of frostbite for that game, weren't there?
Oh yeah, I mean, people, they had their snot was freezing to their mustaches. There's just no other way of putting it. They were poking holes in their beer. But these are hardy people. Now I had a chance to at least go inside once in a while, so I wasn't even doing it like they were doing it. But yeah, it was the coldest I've ever been in my life.
Yeah, and you said that you'd first heard rumors about this as far back as your third year covering hockey. In my historical readings of the original Six era, I don't happen to remember that, Russ. I don't remember that being the case.
Yeah.
I keyed.
No, that's good. And if you want to go back to the original one, it was I want to say it was in 1991 in Las Vegas, and it was Rangers Kings, and it was a preseason game, and there was actually like this sort of fog on the ice. If you get this thing called NHL Vault, you probably could watch it on there, or you could just go to YouTube and see some highlights, but nothing like that game that I just talked about and the ones we will talk about because the technology just wasn't there.
Exactly. For anybody that thinks WrestleMania 9 was the weirdest thing that ever happened to that city, yeah, what would make them think they could do that outdoors, Russ? I mean, I would think indoors, particularly, it would be enough of a challenge to keep it from steaming up like that, but that seems an odd decision for them.
Yeah, but they did it. They did get through the game. I mean, and I remember because it was a preseason game and sort of looked at as a fluky kind of game that the Rangers didn't even play Messier and Gretzky in that game. They just they wouldn't play them. They didn't want to risk it. So if you played in that game, you weren't all that protected by the Rangers. That was basically or the Kings.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably a good decision. I mean, that's all you need is to lose somebody to a knee injury because there was a big rut in the ice there.
Right.
So, yeah, you're right. That's kind of the forgotten prologue by a lot of people to what's happened with these games here. And then subsequently another Heritage Classic years later. But the focus of the book is primarily on what the NHL has been celebrating as the Winter Classic, what they've been using as a big wedge into the American market in recent years, particularly post-lockout. I imagine that particularly the subtitle of your book, I would imagine that that's what that probably focuses on, correct, is helping to pick up the pieces after the previous lockout?
No question about it. It was definitely a big moneymaker for them. And not right away. It took a little while, but it certainly opened a lot of eyes. It created a lot of discussion. It got a lot of coverage just to see what was going to happen, how it was going to be. So, like, that first game in Buffalo was very experimental, even though they had done the Heritage Classic. It's still years later, and you never know. And we got there, and there wasn't that much fanfare. There was only a couple of places you could buy goodies and basically concession stands. So there were just a few of those, and we actually walked out on the field when they were testing the pyrotechnics. You can't even do that now, but then it's just like we walked in and they started blasting them and we felt the heat. So that was kind of interesting, and I remembered I wanted to get a couple of programs because I was lucky enough to have an article in that NHL guide for that game, for the program for the game. So that was kind of nice because I was like, wow, that's, kind of historic for me. And it was sort of a big break, and I was like, this is pretty cool. And who would think years later that I would write a book about all of them? But before that was a big thrill. So it was great. The game was great, and it was just an unusual game because it snowed, so the action got a little slower, but it was fun. You had Crosby winning in the shootout, and I was in the tunnel. Excuse me. Right after the shootout ended, and so that was kind of fun because Crosby literally ran off the ice after he waved to the crowd. I was standing next to Drew Stafford of the Sabres. He was one of the scratches for that game, and those guys cleared out, and some kid went up to Crosby and said, "Hey, Mr. Crosby, can I get your autograph?" And he's like, "Sure, kid." Gives him his autograph, goes into the locker room like it's a Coke commercial or something, and and I witnessed all of it, and I'm like, wow, this is really something, and it did strike me that they're going to probably do this again, and this was a big success. A lot of things happened the right way in that game with snow and with the Crosby factor, and so they were off and running, and then it just got bigger and bigger.
Well, actually, you beautifully anticipated my next question, which was going to be with the two factors that you cited there between the snow, which just made the optics for TV, as somebody who was watching it that day from home, it just unbelievable. And I remember calling some friends of mine who were not as big hockey fans and telling them to tune into it. And then the way it ended with the shootout and Crosby. It's easy to overstate this because the odds are they would have continued to do this in one form or fashion anyways, but how important was that boost of momentum coming out of that day from, again, all the optics on TV, the ending of it, the fact that it couldn't have gone better if they scripted it? How important was that?
Well, it was huge because at the time HD TV was just coming into play, so we all did sort of look at the HD snow in amazement. It was nice. It also helped solidify the TV deal for NBC, which is carrying on. If that game was a bust, would NBC have continued on? I don't know, because that was the big question. What are they going to do about TV? You know, ESPN wasn't around anymore, and NBC was a shorter contract. They were looking for a bigger contract, so that certainly helped kick off a bigger contract for NBC down the road. So I think a lot of those things were pretty important, and then other teams wanting to get it, other cities wanting to be a part of it. All of a sudden there's this process where you have to sort of state your case and bid for it, even though there was no monetary bidding. It was just sort of you send in a letter to the league and tell them why you should have the game next. And so it all of a sudden became this big thing, and now we see it's a big moneymaker. And when it goes off in Detroit next year, there'll be like 8 days of events.
Yeah, with all the ancillary things that have sprung up to support it and to be a part of it, from the additional alumni games to all the other different aspects of it as well. Yeah, it has become huge. Is it fair to say that all sports, of course, the big four sports in America have their all-star games that get bid out, but of course, the only one where there's a championship game where that happens would be the Super Bowl, obviously, because the other sports, it goes to home field advantage and whatnot. Is it fair to say that it's become, and nothing is even close to being on a monetary par with the Super Bowl, but is it closer to being in that area code than it is just any of the all-star games as far as the prestige of the event and the bidding and all that goes into it?
Yeah, it's their biggest in-season game, and it is like a Super Bowl in atmosphere and the party-type atmosphere and the way people think about it. And so I think it has reached that level, and that's what it sort of is for them. It's exactly like a Super Bowl. The only difference is that because they have it in season, then they could separate that from the Stanley Cup and still do a nice job with it. I think the NFL falls victim into having great championship games, and then all of a sudden you have this week off and then this big build-up for a Super Bowl, which almost is always a letdown, even if it's a good game, because it's just sort of like, well, the season's going to go away after this, and it's kind of a bummer, and now we had all this excitement, and then we have nothing. And it's not like the Stanley Cup's that much different, although they have the draft right after, so maybe that's a good thing for them, too, for the NHL. But, yeah, it's their biggest in-season thing. It's their biggest party. It's bigger than the All-Star Game. I think the All-Star Game's in a little trouble, especially now that they didn't have one this year, and next year they won't have one because of the Olympics. So we'll see where the All-Star Game is a couple of years down the road.
There's been talk about possibly doing that outside. Do you give any credence to that notion?
I think there's always a chance, and you never say never, but I don't think they're thinking that way for the next couple anyhow. So I don't think it's soon. Could it happen? Sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
All right, well, retracing back to the first one, of course, you went to cover it, and that was going to be pretty much a given because, in hockey, I know that you're at pretty much all of the big events covering them, be it the draft, Stanley Cup playoffs, finals games that are approximate to you. So you're at all of these things. It was clear you were going to be there the first year, and then even the second year as it went along. But when did you start getting the idea in your head of some kind of, if not a book exactly, something to basically chronicle your experiences covering these games as one led into two, led into the third one, et cetera?
Yeah, I would say when the game was sort of leading up, coming to Philly, I spoke to Mike Del Tufo, who's the co-author, and said, maybe we should do a book on this, because we had traveled together since the Buffalo one. We've been to all of them together. We'd hung out on New Year's Eve together. We've been through a lot of them in the different cities, and we said, this would be a good book, or at least we think it will be. So we started working on it knowing that the one for Philly was coming, and we would focus even more on this one for particular things that we maybe didn't focus on some of the other ones for, knowing that we're going to do a book, knowing that the two were pretty big organizations, and it all worked out that way. So that's when we came up with it. But even though we had been to all of them, it didn't make writing the book any easier than it would be any other book. It's not like we had all this information we could just cut and paste. We really did go with a lot of, because we've covered it on our websites, and so did Mike, and he's got a thing called Center Ice Magazine, and he's got a website called Center Ice, and so he covered it for that as well. So maybe the only thing we cut and pasted were the line combinations for each of the games. That's about it. Otherwise, it's all pretty fresh content. Maybe some of the quotes we did get from when we were there, of course, those you can't do anything about. But we did cover the alumni game in amazingly great detail, where the year before in Pittsburgh, we couldn't even cover it in much detail because they didn't give you that much player availability. The fans certainly were there, and it was sold out, but it had a different feel. And the one where for Philly against the Rangers, it just had this whole different feel. And then afterwards, we had access to all the players for as long as we wanted. So they got great coverage out of it.
As far as the evolving way that the media has allowed coverage, has been allowed coverage by the NHL over the last couple of years here, I'm struck by the question of how much of that has to do with the explosion of social media. I go back to the second Winter Classic when Sportsology and the Lounge were basically just starting out on Twitter, and I remember at that time you were texting me some notes from there. I kept putting it up on Twitter all day, crediting you, and by the end of the day, it seemed kind of weird that some folks in the press box were coming up to you and saying, hey, saw your stuff on Twitter, and you and I weren't used to hearing that at this time, versus you go to right now where everybody sitting at home is tweeting about the game, media folks that are there. So how has the explosion of social media in the last couple of years paralleled the rise of the Winter Classic?
I mean, it's had a big impact because we see now that tweets were going live during the games in Pittsburgh and in Philly, so that was a bit of a change. And, we're taking pictures of practice and we're posting them to Facebook and Twitter and getting instant reaction for that. So you definitely saw all of that sort of exploding, and if you got a good quote, you might throw that up there. I'm always going to put as much as I can up on social media without undercutting the website, so I have to be a little wary of that, but I do it because I think you want to stay as close to the other media as you can. You want to sort of be on that same level, and everybody's doing it now, so it's pretty much expected. And at the beginning, I know leagues were a little worried about social media. Were you going to sort of report on the game live? Because that was generally frowned upon early on, and now it's not. So that's a change where the NHL saw the difference, because again, they didn't necessarily want you doing play-by-play on Twitter while the game was going on live while you were there, and it was in the press notes. But now you see how it is, and they really, even if they wanted to stop it, I'm not sure they could, but they gave up on it because they realized the importance of it. And then, of course, the NHL has their own Twitter account, and they do their fair share too. So everybody's on social media if they want to be competitive. We certainly are. Our outlets are, and you do it. You do it because it's fun. You do it because you want everybody to get the information. You want them to stay engaged, and you want them to still go back to your brand at the end of the day.
Now, we didn't get a chance to see this play out this past year, obviously, with the game at the Big House being canceled due to the lockout and pushed back to the beginning of 2014. But when you're there, when you're covering the next one, I mean, to what extent, in terms of, like you said, you've got that question in your head about saving some stuff for the website versus grabbing people on Twitter. The fact that you now have a book out about this, and the fact that that's now part of your brand, and that you'd like people on Twitter and on Facebook to know to go check out your book, How do you see that equation playing out in your head subsequently about how much to give away on social media versus how much to hold back to the website? I have to imagine that that's got to be part of the calculus from now on as an author about the project.
Yeah, and it was for the last one, too. It's just going to be something where I guess I'll decide the timeliness of the nature of what I'm getting, and am I getting it on an exclusive basis, or are 30 other more people around me? And so that's what you have to sort of figure it out. And it's not like I want to just give crumbs to people who follow me. I want to give them good content as well, but I have to also save good content because I'm sure we're going to do a book update down the road, and I'm going to have some content for that. So it's going to be a juggling act. There's no way around it. I will definitely still report on it both ways, but you're right. I have to hold some back.
Yeah, it's always an interesting balancing act in situations like this. With the book coming out as it did here with the NHL lockout and the big black eye that the league had suffered through that, what has the cooperation level of the NHL been since the book's come out as far as helping to publicize it and being a positive part of the promotion of this book? I would have to think that the league obviously sees the book as something promoting one of its very brightest things that it's got going on right now. So how has that been with the timing on the book coming out?
Well, it's been good. They wanted to actually do a lot, and then they couldn't because they had to deal with a lockout. So we're going to revisit soon and see what we can work it out as far as a cooperative effort, because they were all for it. They liked it, and so I would expect you'll see and hear about that down the road. But it's still so early in the NHL season that we haven't really talked about it again and sort of revisit it. But we're going to, and I imagine it'll be soon. But I have to sort of let the NHL season breathe a little,
Yeah, that's true. You got to see how it all shakes out. And it's interesting, again, because with the timing of the book coming out, I mean, obviously there's pluses and minuses to it with the lockout, but as I see it, there's one big plus to it. I don't know if this is something that's occurred to you much or not, but the fact that there wasn't a game this past January, again, your book is complete for another full year. Do you feel that that's a big plus? Because it won't be a thing of, we didn't have the most recent one in there, because inevitably you're going to have that because they play the game every year. Does having an additional year of having the complete history of the book, is that something that you see as being a big positive?
Yeah, now that you said it, I think it is. I don't think I really thought about it one way or the other, but I think you're right. We do have a chapter leading up to the next game with quotes, and actually the one funny thing is that, of course, Brian Burke has quotes in there, and he'll never be the GM for Toronto when they play, but that's sort of the business of hockey and the way things go. So I think that is a plus, because we had good sales at the beginning, and I expected a little bit of a stall while the NHL season sort of ramped up like it is now, and I think as the season goes on and we head into the playoffs and some teams are out of it, I think people will pay more attention to it then, and then I think they'll pay a lot of attention to it again over the summer. And then once that buzz starts going, sort of leading into that next game, I think we'll have something good going. And so I think it was brave of Motivational Press to decide to put it out and not worry about it being canceled, because we didn't know how that was going to go. They could have just shelved it for a year. Nobody would have said a word. What could you do? But they didn't want to do that. They wanted to just get it out there. They felt like there's enough hockey fans out there that if they get behind it and they see it and they read it, that they'll like it. So I think you're right. I think it has turned out to be a plus.
Yeah, I would think that it would be. And again, as far as the lead up to the next game goes, I know that presently, and folks can check this out on YouTube as well, that you've had some book signings going on, and that will continue to be the case. I'm sure that with the entire atmosphere surrounding the next game up there in Detroit, I would have to imagine that there will be some promotional opportunities for the book once you're up there, no?
Yeah, I would think so, and I think we'll do some things up there for sure. We are going to have another book signing here in the Philly area towards the end of March. I'll announce that soon once the event is locked in, so that's going to be kind of nice. It'll be our first chance for us to catch up with some Flyers fans and fans who want to get the book that way. And then there'll be an opportunity to buy it. I'm going to be in Vegas at an event called the Industry Summit, which is a big collectibles event. That's coming up mid-March. So there'll be an order form there, and if people want to get the book, they can come up, listen to the show, get the order form, get the book, and maybe we'll do something special for them if they order it that way. So that'll be kind of nice, too. So there'll be a couple things. I'm sure we'll add a few more, and, yeah, I think we'll add a few events in Detroit for sure.
Excellent. And that'll give plenty of opportunities for people to get this book. I personally am looking forward to checking it out myself, and I'm sure that it is going to be a joy, not just because a good friend of mine wrote the book, but to be able to check out everything in it. And, again, I guess just the last question before I see if you had anything else you wanted to mention would be any particular one of the games that kind of stands out to you the most. We talked about with the first one, obviously, those moments that help kind of shape the legacy of it and what it would become, but anything then or subsequently that stands out to you sort of head and shoulders above anything else?
Well, I think on the cover is the Chicago-Detroit game that was at Wrigley, and I think people will look at that fondly down the road because Wrigley at some point will be gone, and, the Cubs are getting a new place. And that game, I think out of all of them, most closely resembled a regular season NHL game because generally some crazy things can happen in these outdoor games, and it could be slower, it could be weather, it could be a bunch of things. But that one seemed to be at a really brisk NHL pace the whole time and just really felt like that regular season NHL game, which I'm not sure is good or bad, but it's memorable because of that. And the Philly game was really memorable because you had the penalty shot with Briere, with Lundqvist stopping him in Boston, and Sean Thornton fought Dan Carcillo, and that was the first fight in Winter Classic history, and so that was fun. And yeah, like I said, the penalty shot last year was a big deal and turned out to be a real big factor in that game. So that was something else that people remember. So I think you could always pull something out of all of them, and I mentioned the first one because of the Crosby shootout winner, but I think the two are really the Chicago and the Philly.
Yeah, and that's, again, I would be a homer for agreeing with you on the Chicago-Detroit game as a Wings fan, but that was very memorable to me. I actually own a picture I bought at one of these memorabilia shows, nice big picture of the Wrigley Field with the rink there. And, yeah, I've seen all of them on TV, and they've all been great to watch, but I'm sure it doesn't even compare to what it's like to be there, which clearly this book is going to let people have a window as to whatever that's all about. Russ, anything else about the book or anything that we didn't mention that we should?
Yeah, and to go further with the Detroit angle, Ty Conklin wrote the forward, and he really wrote it. It's not like Ty Conklin called me and I transcribed it. No, he wrote it, and he wrote a couple drafts of it, and he did a great job. And it's one of the times where you could get a player's opinion, reaction, everything in a couple of pages about how he felt the Winter Classic affected him. And let's face it, he played the most of them. We all looked at him as the preeminent outdoor goalie. And I think, and I won't give it away, I think I was blown away by what he wrote because of just the way he felt going into that city, driving around that city, how, going into a cab, how fans were reacting to him, all those kinds of things that would really be hard for me to gauge, even as a reporter, unless I was witnessing it firsthand. So through the players' eyes, I thought it was really amazing, even though you get quotes from guys and they talk about it, but you don't get a very great chance to talk about it with a guy like that where, let's face it, as a goalie, you got the best seat in the house.
Sure, and one of the top names, as you said, that comes to mind when you think of the Winter Classic and this particular era of outdoor hockey. So particularly insightful to see what he thinks. And as you said, the thoughts about the excitement around the cities there, the NHL players getting to sample that kind of excitement that we can only wish that they got to sample on more of a regular basis from people. And maybe they will, and maybe the game itself will help lead to a broadening of popularity that will make it possible. But again, I personally can't wait to check out the book, my friend, and everything about it. That this project is very exciting, and what better way for us to do the 250th Lounge mini episode. Thank you so much, Russ.
No, I'm really honored. I felt like it was an episode of like This Is Your Life or something, so it was pretty cool, and I owe a lot to you because I always thought you were a great host. You are a great host. You do a terrific job. It's a milestone show. I appreciate you having me on. It was a no-brainer for the Sportsology channel to get your show and keep it going.
Well, I appreciate everything, Russ. Thank you so much, my friend, and thank you all for tuning in to this great joint mini episode here of the FDH Lounge and Sportsology.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and the Periodic Table of Elements.